And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Banner Monday, where we kick off each week by doing what IU fans love more than anything else, talking hoops. This is the 11th edition of Banner Monday, and it is our 467th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the afternoon of Monday, January 14th, 2018. I am your host, Jerod Morris, and let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud Banner Moment. And this week's Banner Moment occurred on Friday evening when Sam Vecini, who covers college hoops in the NBA draft for The Athletic, tweeted the following, quote, "Among the 388 players in Division I to take at least 50 shots at the basket in half-court settings, Romeo Langford ranks number one in finishing efficiency at 78% per synergy." That's impressive, and it gets better. Romeo is also number one in the percentage of possessions at the rim that result in free throws at 16.4%. And this means that he is by far the leader in points per possession around the rim at a staggering 1.738 points per possession. Now think about that. Every time Romeo takes a shot at the rim, he's generating close to 2 points. It's astounding, and no one else is even really close. Next on the list among players from Power 5 conference schools, Zion Williamson at 1.571 points per possession. And what's so crazy about this is that Romeo is a 6'6 freshman. Most of the other names near the top of the list are big men who do most of their work in the paint, guys like Moses Brown and Daniel Gafford. And a freshman, especially one with Romeo's relatively slight build, isn't supposed to have the strength and guile to be that effective around the basket. Yet Romeo is, and it's no fluke. We see it game in, game out. Romeo possesses a breathtaking amalgamation of skills, instincts, and natural athletic talent that enable him to create points seemingly at will anytime he's able to get into the paint. And in case you hadn't noticed, his three-point shot is coming around. He's 7 for his last 15 from deep and shooting 40% overall in Big Ten play. If the improved outside shooting is a harbinger of things to come, and if his at-the-basket efficiency sustains moving forward, Romeo will be one of the most lethal offensive weapons in all of college basketball over the next 2 months. And when you have a guy like that, you're a threat to win every game you play. All right, joining me for this week's Mailbag, he's a columnist for The Big Lead, a co-host of The Hangover, and he thoroughly enjoyed his one Sunday of Patriots fandom over the weekend.
Screw the Chargers.
He is Ryan Phillips. Ryan, anything to rant about today?
Go Pats, go.
Still? Are you going to?
Oh, no,
is it going to be residual?
No, go
Okay.
Chiefs. Go Chiefs.
Okay.
Hope they dominate. I'm actually rooting for the Saints to win it all, I think, this year, just for Drew Brees. I don't know. I like the guy. I want to, first of all, give a shout out to my coworker at the Big Lead, Ryan Glassfield, does a lot of amazing media pieces and really a great reporter and writer and feature writer. He and his wife are now proud parents. She gave birth over the weekend to a lovely baby girl. So congratulations, Ryan. As for the Romeo Langford statistic you gave, I'm going to take a different tact on it and say that just proves my point from the last post-game show that Romeo needs to attack more. I mean, he's so good. And I think that it's the fact that he's such a good kid and he wants to defer to his teammates so much. I think in some cases he needs to be a little more selfish. And he's so efficient when he drives, and the results are so good when he drives and gets to the rim that he really needs to be more aggressive and more selfish at times, especially when things aren't going well for the team. And again, not a knock on him. It's something that develops when you're young and will get better. But I really do think that that's something that needs to happen towards the second half of this season. Is he needs to learn when to dominate and take over games. And he did a lot of that at the end of the Maryland game. Hopefully it carries over because they'll need some of that until this team gets fully healthy.
Yep. All right. So on tap for today's Banner Monday, Ryan and I are going to answer your questions. Then we will take a look at IU and around the Big Ten with Mike DeCourcy in our second segment. And then Josh Wilson from the Inside Out Pod is here to help me preview IU Nebraska. Remember that Basketball 201 is now on its own on Tuesdays. That'll be broadcast live Tuesday at 2 Eastern. So we got a quick turnaround. We're doing this, and then the IU Nebraska game is in just a few hours. But we're excited to dive in, answer your questions, and just talk some more basketball. So, Ryan, let's tackle some questions. What do you say?
Let's do it.
So this first one, this comes from Jeff. He says, how much should we read into the Jerome Hunter post of him getting back to some practice? Is it a late Christmas present or just a teaser for next year? So just so everybody knows what this is, Eddie Cotton retweeted this. It was something that Jerome posted on Instagram of himself in Cook Hall, like he made a long three-pointer, and then I don't remember exactly what it said. It was something like getting ready or something like that. Obviously, awesome to see that Jerome is up, taking shots, getting ready to work out. I would not read too much into this. There is a huge, huge difference between taking some shots on your own in sweatpants at Cook Hall and playing competitive basketball. I have heard nothing that leads me to believe that Jerome Hunter is going to play this year. Obviously, if he does, I'll be pleasantly surprised, but I haven't seen anything. So just take this as, hey, that's awesome that, he's up, working out, shooting around, that kind of thing, but I would not take it to mean that it's really any more likely that he's actually going to play this year. You have anything else to add to that, Ryan?
No, I think that's a fair assessment. Look, I think that it's great news that Jerome is starting to look healthy and stuff like that. I don't know if he's going to play this year. Maybe he will. Maybe it'll be one of those things where he runs well in practice, starts doing some good things, and they say, you know what, we could use a boost at the end of the year. Let's get him in there. But I wouldn't pin your hopes on that when you've missed this much of the season. It's really hard to push forward and take that next step to really waste a year of eligibility this far into the season. So I hope he's getting healthy. I think we all hope that, but let's not get our hopes up too much. If something, and that way also, if he comes back, it's a bonus and we're all happy, but I wouldn't expect it.
Yeah, and same on Race. I haven't heard anything else on him that leads me to believe he's any closer to playing. In fact, some of the chatter is even a little bit more pessimistic about him coming back this season. So, it's chatter. I mean, we have to wait and see. It's kind of one of those. I know we all are going to wonder and we want to see these guys out there, but with those two especially, it's probably worth just putting them out of your mind right now until you hear something definitive like they've started practicing or something like that. Because, otherwise, you might read into this Twitter post or that, and it's not enough to really base anything on. We're just going to have to wait and see with those guys. Anything we get from either of them, I think at this point should be considered a bonus for the rest of the year. Okay, next question.
Let me just add with Race. I mean, there is a positive that he's traveling with the team and all that stuff, but that doesn't mean that he's close to coming back. But it's a positive step forward that, for a while, they weren't even letting him on the bench during games and things like that, weren't letting him travel. So he's traveling, he's with the team, obviously positive developments, but yeah, we're going to know when we know, pretty much. I mean, that's as far as that goes with them. We'll know when they update us and we hear it. And so we both have heard chatter on both of those guys, and it doesn't sound great. So we'll see as it goes, but it's one of those things where we didn't hear. I mean, we heard the rumors that Rob Finney was going to play at Maryland about an hour before the game. We both got sort of text from people that he was going to play. So you don't really know until things happen, and they happen kind of fast sometimes.
All right, this is from John. He said, Tim Priller posted on Twitter complaining about the fans' harsh criticism of this year's team. I agree. And by the way, here's the tweet that Tim sent. It said, quote, "It's so funny when your team is winning and everything is good. As soon as you lose a game or two, people blame or say certain players suck. Go kick rocks. Y'all are lame and no one cares about your opinion." Good for Tim for stepping up and having the current Hoosiers back. John says, "I agree with the injuries and being only the second year for Archie. I think it's been harsh." Now, this gets to the heart of John's question. Does this sort of criticism affect our ability to land five-star kids? Kind of a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's good to have high expectations. On the other hand, maybe it's best for the average fan to leave the coaching and motivation of the team to the coaches. What do you think, Ryan? I can't imagine that this would necessarily sway a five-star kid's decision, seeing criticism, because I would think at most of the top schools, you're going to have an irrational segment of the fan base that is just upset no matter what and feels like it's okay on social media to toss out insults and nasty things that you would never say to somebody's face.
Exactly. No, I think it's something. If you think that like kids and their parents don't watch that kind of stuff and follow that kind of stuff, you're wrong. They do, and they see that. They peruse messages.
They definitely do.
They peruse message boards. They watch social media. So if there is one fan base that is like criticizing a kid or says like this kid better come to school or this is going to happen, they know that. They're aware of that. So I've heard people say that like, oh, the players don't care. They don't pay attention to social media. They don't pay attention to message boards. They're on that stuff constantly, just like the rest of us, because they're fans of basketball and they're doing their research. And so, yes, I think there is an element of them checking that stuff. When it's overwhelming, I think it could affect a decision. Like, a lot of decisions get affected by the temperature on social media surrounding coaches. And I know that there are some players who have chosen to go elsewhere because based on what the fans were saying, certain coaches may not be around, for the whole 4 years that kid's going to be in school. And there's a lot of times these kids, I know people always say, well, pick the school for the school, not the coach and not the basketball program. Well, that's just unrealistic. And
pick it for the post-game show.
Yeah, there you go.
Go where they have the best fan-run post-game show.
We're going to get every player then. No, but there is an element of that, but I don't think that's going to sway a kid. If it's overwhelmingly negative and it's all negative, it's 100% negative. Yeah, that could affect a kid. I don't think Indiana.
But that's not even realistic. I mean,
no, and I don't think Indiana's current climate's going to be an issue. But look, there were times during the Mike Davis era where the fan base was entirely negative, and a ton of Indiana kids who would have gone to IU and loved Mike Davis went elsewhere because they just didn't like it. They didn't like the atmosphere around the program. So there is an element of that, and that is part of the decision that kids make is, what are the fans like? What is the atmosphere like? Because the fan attitude bleeds into the program. It really does. And yeah, when I was on campus for about 4 years, we heard about kids all the time who wanted to come. Greg Oden was a kid who wanted to come to Indiana, but he didn't think Mike Davis was going to be there, and he thought it was just going to be a negative black cloud over the program. And why would he go? And so he went to Ohio State. And that's a guy who's a program-changing recruit. And so I wouldn't say right now it's a problem, but there is an element of Indiana basketball where the fans are so fatalistic and just waiting for the other shoe to drop and things to be bad right now, because we've had a lot of bad over the last 2 decades pretty much. And so kind of have to dial back expectations, let things play out, and let a program develop instead of just after every loss making it like it's the worst thing ever.
Yeah. And social media amplifies the vocal minority.
It does.
That's the other thing to remember is that, you can have, 99 fans that are positive and there's one voice that's negative, and, people like us will react to it, so, I mean, we have to be careful with that too. So, but I don't, for the most part,
we're pretty well balanced on this show, I think. And we get accused of being sunshine pumpers and, like everything's fine. Well, no, it's basketball. Things go wrong, things go right. Doesn't matter how well you game plan or whatever. It's a game and the ball bounces funny sometimes. I mean, you have to have that perspective. Not everything's going to be perfect and not every team's going to go undefeated. You're going to lose games, and you're going to lose games in wacky ways. That's just the way it is. So I think
sunshine pumpers,
that
man. Needs to be like a band name. Like if I ever start a band, I'm going to be Jared Morris and the Sunshine Pumpers. I think that would work out.
Like a 70s rock fusion band.
Yeah. Okay. So let's hit a few more of these quickly. I know you don't have a ton of time with us this afternoon. This is from Bill, and I'm going to have to rely on you to answer this because I don't have a lot. He said, if this season's Hoosier Squad was a comic strip character from a Marvel comic superhero to Beetle Bailey, who would it be? I know we're not quite Charlie Brown from Peanuts. My guess was something like the little boy in the family circle, the one who's always having to learn hard lessons.
That's pretty good. I mean, it's such a broad question. It's really hard to answer. I don't know. It's very tough because there are so many different elements. Like I think each guy could kind of be a different character. Like I would put Juwan Morgan would be Iron Man. He's not necessarily, he doesn't have like superpowers, but he makes the best out of everything. Kind of a Batman-ish guy, actually. Romeo Langford would be Superman. I mean, he just is. I don't know, but there's different guys that would be different things. I don't think the entire team could be a comic book strip. But if you give, what? Let me think about this, and we will re-answer this on Thursday during radio.
Yeah, I need a little more time to think about it too.
So let's do that. So Bill was the question.
Bill, this is from Bill.
Good question, Bill. We will readdress that, so you have to listen on Thursday.
Okay, that seems fair. I'll accept the invitation on behalf of Bill.
There's so many to choose from, I got to kind of...
There are. Okay, this is from Max. Again, another one of these questions we seem to get every week. If McRoberts and Davis keep getting healthier, and that's a big if on both of those guys, is there still a meaningful role for Fitzner on this team, i.e. outside of needing a tall guy due to injury problems? Is there a way Archie can make him a positive contributor in the rotation? I want to say this right now. What are we, 5 hours before the tip of the Nebraska game, maybe 3.5 hours before the tip of the Nebraska game? I think Fitzner's going to have an impact tonight. I think he's going to hit 2 or 3 threes, and I'll tell you why. We're going to talk about this in the preview. Nebraska's biggest weakness defensively is defending the pick and roll. and they're especially not good at defending the pop man. And so I think if you can get Fitzner in there, run some pick and roll actions, which Indiana has been doing more of, and you would certainly think the matchup would dictate you maybe to get him popping out for a couple of open looks from three. And I think this could be one of those games that we've alluded to all year, Ryan, where Fitzner's going to come in, he's going to hit 3 or 4 threes and help us win a game. It's not going to happen game in, game out, obviously, but I think this could be one of the nights that it could happen because of the matchup. So just keep your eye on that. But what do you think about his role generally?
I mean, he's got to find some confidence. I think that's the key. And if he hits 2 or 3 threes, I think you've got that confidence back, and maybe can, because that's his whole role on this team, was to be a guy who could spread the floor. And that was it from day one. He was never going to be a great post player, never going to be a great defender. He was going to be okay at those things, but he needs to be able to spread the floor. And in doing so, he's going to take the opposing team's big man away from the basket, create driving lanes where there's no rim protector. That's basically his role. And he hasn't been hitting threes, hasn't been finding open threes. He should be able to find open threes. And right now, I think he's not taking them because he's mind effed. Like, I'm sorry, I don't know how to better say that, but his mind is messed up. And
pretty good way to say it, I think.
He has no confidence, and he needs to hit a couple in a game. I mean, you can hit 1,000 in practice until you hit a couple in a game. It doesn't change the way you play. And
he's still shooting 40%. It's just that the bulk of those came in 2 games.
Yeah, and he's just not shooting anymore. He's not even letting it go, and he needs to, because look, I would rather have him fire a 3 from the perimeter than Devontae Green have a floater in the lane, like we've seen. But sometimes, quite frankly, we talked about this on the postgame show, Devontae has to do that because nobody else is shooting and nobody else is doing anything. He feels like, I'm going to attack and get into the lane, and I may not like that shot, but I really don't see a ton of other options on the floor, especially when Juwan Morgan and Romeo Langford aren't on the floor. So I think that he's a guy who needs to be able to do some stuff for this team. As far as Duran and Zach go, man, those guys got to get healthy. I mean, you're going to need them. It's a thin roster right now.
And by healthy, we're talking like 65%, because that's about all Zach's going to be, and Duran clearly wasn't even that against the Maryland game.
No,
he just needs to get to the point where we can run up and
didn't
down
Archie say after the game
Archie said he shouldn't have played him.
Shouldn't have played. Yeah. And I agree with that. But again, when a kid tells you, I'm ready to go, at some point you kind of got to trust them, because you can only tell so much, and you kind of got to trust them with their own bodies, and he wasn't ready to go. So we're all hoping he gets healthy quickly, because when he's in there, offensively, he dominates on the block. He really does. He's fantastic when he gets the ball in the post, but it feels almost like an automatic basket at least half the time, 2/3.
He's a good passer too.
And he's a very good passer, and he reads double teams well, but he's just not healthy. So we all want him back, definitely.
And most importantly, he's a post defender,
Yeah.
I mean, takes a little pressure off Juwan. All right, so this might be our last question. I actually want to pull one from Twitter, because you just mentioned Devontae on runners. So I got this question from Indie Sports Partisan, and I looked up the numbers, but I want to get your impression before I tell you the numbers. He says, I'm curious what Devontae Green's three-point percentage is. Oh, I didn't even recognize that he said three-point percentage. But anyway, his three-point percentage when he catches and shoots while spotted up versus when he shoots while trying to create off the dribble. Which one do you think is higher?
I would say spot up for sure. Just by watching games. I might be wrong, but that would be what I would say.
That's what I would have thought too. Here are the numbers. Devontae on catch and shoot opportunities is 7 of 18 overall. All 7 of the makes are 3-pointers. So his effective field goal percentage is 42%. I'm not sure what the breakdown is on just 3-pointers, but I would imagine most of his catch and shoot opportunities have been threes.
I'd agree.
On dribble jumpers, Devontae is 11 for 21, and 5 of those are 3-pointers. So his effective field goal percentage is 64.3%. Wow. So not huge sample sizes, 21 on one and 18 on the other, but he's been much better off the dribble. Now, what do you think Devontae's percentage is on runners?
It's got to be low.
3 for 15, which ranks in the 9th percentile nationally. That certainly matches the eye test.
I mean, he's a smaller guy trying to go into the lane, and he's not great at it, but he does create things when he goes in there. I just wish that he wouldn't wind up with a runner every time.
He does. I mean, it's as he evolves, because again, I think that those first 2 numbers will probably surprise some people. Like, Devontae's pretty good shooting off the dribble. He does get a little crazy when he's in the lane with some of the runners, and especially if he's close for what look like easy layups, and he does his spin stuff, and it ends up, bricking or airballing. if he, I feel like this is the next step for him. If he can get rid of some of those, which are as good as turnovers, even if they don't go in the turnover category, he's going to improve his offensive efficiency. And so if he can drive, and Archie talked about this before the last game, if he can drive and get into the lane and look to kick a little bit more, or find guys instead of just putting up those runners, now maybe you get a higher percentage look. And that, again, you look for these marginal areas where you can improve the offense when it's not being initiated by Romeo and Juwan. I think that's one spot. I think Devontae takes too much criticism, but certainly in that particular area, I think there's room for improvement.
Yeah, for sure. And I also think that he just needs to get better at passing when he's not, squared up and moving the ball. I think that sometimes he floats passes and stuff when he's driving, and he just needs to focus more on getting the ball to his teammates.
Yeah. Coach says, come on, Jerod, let him play his game. That's what he does. And again, I think the thing with Devontae is he's being asked to really play a game that isn't his. You're really asking a guy to hold back on his instincts. And we all expect that to happen just at the snap of a finger, which is why I think you got to be a little bit patient. And maybe Devontae is not a guy that Archie would have recruited, but he's trying to make the best of it because that's the guy that he inherited. And I think we've seen growth in Devontae. So I am not as down on Devontae, I guess, as others because I don't know, maybe I'm more willing to see the incremental growth, but others could also say, maybe I'm unrealistic about how far away he is from being the guard that we all want him to be. Probably room on both sides of that argument.
Yeah.
But, again, do you know what his efficiency level is running the pick and roll this year? He's in the 90th percentile. It's really good. Romeo, just for context, Romeo is in the 95th percentile nationally. Devontae's been really good running the pick and roll, and that's the weakness for Nebraska. So I would expect to see him in some pick and roll actions tonight. And if you can get he and Romeo going, I think that could be a big source of offense for Indiana tonight. Sure. All right, one more question for you, Ryan.
All right.
This is from Leland. Does the constant repetition of emphasizing one sport contribute to the ongoing injury situation? From high school or perhaps before, it seems that an athlete is committed to one sport and plays it exclusively and continually. Would time off help the athlete recover from the constant use and mitigate the injuries to the body? So I don't know if he's talking specifically about IU's injury situation here, but maybe just injuries more in general.
I don't know if it's devotion to one sport. I am for letting kids play multiple sports and actually encouraging them to play multiple sports, mainly because you're interacting with different people. And I think that the social aspect of sports for a kid's upbringing is as important as the athletic endeavor there. I've always said that I think that the most mature and well-rounded people played team sports growing up. And that's not always true, but I think that you tend to learn a lot about working with others and how to kind of achieve a goal that's not just for you if you play team sports. And I think that playing multiple team sports and interacting with different people and I think that's a positive. As far as injuries go, I don't know. That's really tough because each injury is so different and every situation is different. I do think that playing year round like we do now, I mean, when I played in the olden days, we would play basketball in the spring.
Wearing Chuck Taylors.
Yeah, exactly. Really short shorts. We would play in the spring.
Which are back now, by the way.
I know, it's great. I could sell some of my old ones; they'd be vintage. We used to play basketball as a winter sport. Obviously, we play in the winter, and then we would take a couple weeks off. I played baseball, but then we would do spotty tournaments. We would do it every couple weeks. We'd have like a basketball tournament for a couple days or a week or whatever. But it wasn't every weekend, and it wasn't all summer too. And we would have a couple tournaments during the summer. We had them planned out way in advance. We knew how to build around it. But it wasn't, every weekend we weren't at a different spot. Every weekend we weren't traveling to a different spot. Every weekend we weren't going somewhere else. I felt like we had a chance to be kids as well. And I think now these kids grow up and you see a guy like Zion Williamson. I mean, you see the result of playing all the time. He's unbelievable. I mean, that guy was more prepared for the NBA stepping on campus at Duke than 10 years ago. A lot of kids were on draft night. And the reason why is he's played all over the world. He's played the top players for 4 years and played in all these tournaments and all that stuff. So it prepares you really well for the professional aspect of it, but I'm not sure it prepares you, for life, because how many free weekends did Zion Williamson or any of these guys have in the summer to hang out with their friends and be, normal kids? And it's very rough. And when you have that kind of ability, obviously people want to develop it and take advantage of it and make you better as well. But I also feel like you become sort of a businessman at a very young age. And so that's my concern with the specialization and with, constantly playing year round. I'm sure it can't be good for your body, but I'm not a doctor. I can't tell you that, but it can't be good constantly putting your body through that abuse. Because look, running up and down a hardwood floor for hours on end is not good for your spine. It's not good for, your whole body. Trust me, I got back issues. I know. There are some days I wish I'd played a little less basketball because of that, but it's not good for your knees. It's not good for your ankles. It's not good for your back. But that's long-term stuff. I don't know about in the short term. I don't know about, how that impacts, but I would say that I think that there is an aspect to this where these people become commodities at a really young age. And that kind of bothers me. And I would really like to see the AAU culture sort of dial back on that and just let these kids be kids and play and go to these tournaments, because it does make them better and it does make them more effective and it's good for their development. But at the same time, I don't think our number one concern should be their development as players. It should be their development as human beings.
It's a quaint thought. I agree with you. I certainly want to bring up my kids that way, but I think the cat's kind of out of the bag, or the genie's out of the bottle on that one.
As long as you can make money off somebody.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to change.
Happen. Yeah.
By the way, tweet of the afternoon from Mike Lewis, who's back in Bloomington, an assistant coach for Nebraska. He said, walk back to the hotel today from Assembly Hall. 20 years go by and you forget how nice campus is. Probably should have spent more time there. And he's got the little laughter emoji pictured standing next to the sample gates. So Mike Lewis.
You think he was you think he was ditching class a lot? Is that what Mike's saying? Going to tutoring hours?
No, I think what he meant is they probably just didn't have that much time.
Yeah.
He's probably practicing all the time and traveling and doing all that stuff. All right, man, I know you got to get back to work. You'll be on the postgame show tonight, right?
Of course.
Okay, I figured. Well, I don't know. It's early.
It's true. 3:30.
But it's before your wake-up time. Usually we have to worry about Andy's bedtime. We got to worry about your wake-up time.
I know. Starts. I'm usually asleep at 3:30 in the afternoon. Thanks, Jerod. Appreciate that.
It's happened before.
It's actually pouring rain here, so maybe I will doze off.
No, please don't. Please don't.
Yeah,
Please don't. All right, man. I'll talk to you in a few hours.
Later, guys.
All right, coming up on the Assembly Call, it is time for our Big Ten Roundup with Mike DeCourcy from BTN and the Sporting News. We're going to get his thoughts on Indiana's performance at Maryland and try, with great difficulty, to pick our midseason All Big Ten teams. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. All righty. Hello to everybody who's watching live. Good to see you all here. Quickest turnaround we've ever had from Banner Monday to... I don't think we've ever had 2 official episodes, like full-length episodes of the Assembly Call in one day. So we will thank the crazy Big Ten schedule for having... Indiana has a game on every day of the week, so there was no day to plan Banner Monday where we weren't going to have a quick turnaround like this, but we will power through it. All right, Mike DeCourcy getting ready to go. It's going to be interesting going through these all Big Ten teams. I spent way too much time looking at this today, and I still am not confident that I figured anything out. Let me unmute Mike. There we go. Mike, how are you?
I'm doing well, Jerod. How are you?
Fantastic. I'm ready for some basketball.
Oh, you're ready to get some, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I know. That's the one positive about the early Monday start is you don't have to wait too long into the week to get some basketball. So
that's for sure.
We got that going for us. Then a nice long layoff before the Purdue game. So, all righty. Are you ready to go?
I am.
Okay. Let's do it. Here we go. Welcome back to Banner Monday. Each week here in our second segment, we zoom out to get an objective opinion on our Hoosiers and to kind of take a look at how things are going across the Big Ten Conference. And there's no one better to do that than Mike DeCourcy, who covers Big Ten hoops for BTN in addition to his columns for the Sporting News. Mike, welcome back to Banner Monday.
Thank you, Jerod. Well, great to be back. And boy, is this going to be an interesting week of Big Ten basketball starting tonight.
It is. I feel like we're going to be able to say that every Monday this season, because like no matter what the matchups are, you look at it and you're like, oh, that's a good matchup. That's a good matchup. So it's just going to be that kind of season. So let's start as we always do. Let's talk about Indiana's most recent game. What were your takeaways from the Hoosiers' loss at Maryland?
Yeah, first of all, I thought that they played terrifically in the first half, especially at the defensive end. They did a great job. And I found the aftermath of the game almost as interesting as the game itself, because I saw a lot of reaction on Twitter to how it eventually got away from them. And there was a lot of, gosh, we got kicked on the boards and didn't guard in the second half. And none of that's untrue. But I think you have to look at what you put on the floor at that point. Deron Davis, barely able to play. You're in a circumstance where you're playing Juwan Morgan, who's already an undersized center, and you're playing it against probably the most physically powerful front line in the Big Ten, or certainly one of the two or three. I might vote for them based on Bruno Fernando alone, but one of, without a doubt. I mean, them, Minnesota, Michigan State, and then the conversation probably trickles down a little bit. And I think you have to be who you are. And in that iteration on Friday night, they were small and they were quick and they were offensively gifted. And I thought that there were points in the first half when they had a chance to really bury Maryland and not just put them down, but I mean, put them down by bucket loads. And I thought that they let some possessions get away from them that they didn't have to. And when Maryland started its run, I thought their offensive execution and their shot selection still wasn't pristine. And when you're in that circumstance and you're playing small, and Justin Smith even is in foul trouble, and you don't have full access to him, well, then you have to be the best version of what you are. And I didn't think they were for enough of that game to walk out of there with a victory.
Yeah, certainly on the defensive end without Justin Smith in the second half. I mean, they were just a sieve. It was one of their worst performances defensively, and they just, even Romeo's, greatness at the end of the game wasn't able to overcome it.
But I think it was more about their offense. And I know that they shot a good number, and I know that they, that the stats weren't bad, but some of these things are situational. Some of these things are anecdotal, if you want to call it that. And it's okay, there's this moment or these couple of moments where you can just tell Maryland, hey, go ahead and quit. We're not letting you back in. And instead you said, hey, Maryland, doors open a little bit. If you guys want to get your act together, you got a chance. And that's what happened. They got their act together. And then when Maryland got their act together, there's that feeling that you have to be really good at what you are. And they weren't. And I think a lot of that, again, goes back to, and I probably ring this bell as much as anybody, especially anybody that's not on the inside of the tent at Indiana. The injuries to Robert Finney took away from their development as an offense, as an offense with definition. And so some of the things that I'm talking about, there's an explanation for it, but I'm not sure there's an excuse for it, because you've played everybody that's been in that game that's taking shots that maybe aren't ideal, or making passes that probably aren't there. Those guys have all played enough basketball to know that in their circumstance, they had to be better. And unfortunately, they weren't quite.
Yeah, no, it's very well put. You mentioned the injuries. So is there any way that you can kind of put Indiana's injury situation kind of into perspective for us? Because obviously the amount and the type of injuries they've certainly felt abnormal. But I'm kind of wondering how abnormal it is, and if there are any kind of relevant examples of teams that struggled with injuries like this through January and then mostly got healthy and kind of kicked it into another gear down the stretch, because that's obviously what we're all hoping for.
Well, I think that probably the best example of that, and you wouldn't necessarily want to transpose their ending onto yours, but Michigan State in 2016, when they won the Big Ten championship with Denzel Valentine as their star. Remember, Denzel missed a lot of that year. Missed, I think, 5 games.
That's right.
In early January. They had multiple players. I think they had 5 players miss multiple games that year. Gavin Schilling missed a big chunk of time. And obviously the most compelling injury was to Denzel, but they had injuries all through their lineup, and they were able to get most of those players back for the stretch, and they played great in February, and they wind up as a number 2 seed, and then they get
Just stop there. Just stop there.
That you can't count on the idea that whatever happens to Indiana, that you're going to get a misseeded team like Middle Tennessee State stuck in your bracket. So
if this team gets a number 2 seed, sign me up right now.
Oh yes,
sign me up.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. But I think that this team, the good thing about the injuries that have occurred, good thing about is none of them was severe and debilitating, except maybe Duran's, which seems to be nagging. And none of, although they all cost time, none of them cost a long stretch of time. So you didn't have to completely reform your team during that absence and then completely reform it again during the return of that player. So what you've had to date is a series of disruptions. We lost some time in late November because of it. We lost some time in early December because of it. And now you're losing, or have lost, I should say, because it's over now, some time in early January because of it. And you still have a lot of time. It's really 2 months left in the Big Ten season. There are 8 more episodes of Big Ten and beyond. That's how I keep count. So there's 2 full months left of the season. So a lot of time to get better. Now, the hard part of getting well, so to speak, is that you don't go out and get 3 games that are like, those are 3 W's you chalk up, just a question of how you perform. Every game almost you're playing in this league is, boy, we got to play to win this one. This is the reality of the league. There's no game that you look at and say, that's a W. And Rutgers the other night, you saw that with Ohio State. Illinois pushed Michigan last Thursday to into the final 10 minutes. Michigan's one of the 2-3 best teams in the country. So there's no game that's going to make you well. You've got to get well in practice, get better, and then be ready to play on game night.
I'm going to go back to one thing you said about the injuries, about not being totally debilitating, because 2 that are easy to forget about are Jerome Hunter and Race Thompson. 2 guys who were expected to be rotation guys. Now, you haven't had them all year, so exactly. So it hasn't necessarily, but you did have them in practice, and Jerome won the gold jersey before he got hurt. I guess like when you add that into it, where you have your second best recruit and then another top 100 guy in Race Thompson that you expected to provide really valuable depth behind Juwan. Does that change the calculus at all when you're trying to figure out, what kind of injury curve you grade Archie on for this season or kind of assess the team on?
Yeah, when you get to the end, sure. I mean, you expected to, and because especially when you look at a game like Fridays, where your single biggest issue was they weren't big enough, and that's not changing necessarily. Duran makes you bigger. He doesn't make you big, but he makes you bigger. And at times he's been available and at times he has not. And that was one of the nots. And that was probably a bad night to be not. I mean, a game against Ohio State, he's not available. You've got some good, very good big guys on the team, but they're not going to blow you away the way Bruno does with his physicality and his athleticism, dynamism. He's just amazing. And he's playing so hard, and he's an effective player now. So if you happen to miss Duran against Ohio State, it wouldn't punish you as much as it did in that particular game. But you're right. I mean, when you go back toward the end, I don't factor those guys in because they haven't played,
and they're not going to. So it's
it hasn't felt like they were a part of this team.
Yeah,
and it felt like that if you had all the guys who are a part of this team all the year, you'd be in, even though you would be too small to maybe win a national championship or maybe even a league championship, you'd be good enough to be really good. And so that's kind of why I always just sort of slice those 2 out of the equation, because they were never a part of this. And it's really more about, it's been more about Devontae and about Duran and about now Robert and as well as Zach McRoberts. I mean, it's always been somebody that you considered to be a part of the rotation, because those guys were, then they weren't, and now they are again.
I think part of the issue for Indiana fans is it has felt like for the last 4 or 5 years that every roster has had a significant hole or a significant deficiency in terms of just how it was constructed. And you'll see that this year. It's like, man, why don't we have more experienced depth behind Juwan? Man, it would really be nice to have another wing. And it's like, oh yeah, well, Jerome and Race were supposed to be on this team. So roster building, not necessarily the issue. It's just been just a confluence of crazy injuries that hopefully will not be an annual thing, and I don't think anybody expects that they will be. Okay, so let's look around the Big Ten. Start as we always do with our power rankings. Who is the current top four? Michigan, Michigan State. I have to assume Maryland has probably solidified their hold on the third spot, I would think.
Yeah, those three are fairly easy to put in order at the moment. And I'm not saying that, I don't think that Michigan and Michigan State are going to fall out of 1-2. I don't expect that. I looked at the schedules over the weekend for those two and for Maryland. And again, there's no easy schedule in this league. Nobody has one. I mean, it's impossible because, even if you had all your road games were Rutgers, Penn State, Northwestern, Illinois, would you really feel, you might feel better about that than Michigan, at Michigan State, at Minnesota, and at Nebraska, say, or at IU, but you still wouldn't feel good. So there is no easy schedule, but I thought that, whatever schedule door might have opened for Maryland, given where they are right now, it's not there. Their schedule's really hard. So that's not going to be what gets them to that level. And although I do think they have the most high-end talent of any team in the league. Bruno Fernando and Jalen Smith will be probably the highest selected players in this league whenever it is that they enter the NBA draft. With Romeo being the one that would be in that category, but in terms of having multiple, that they'll have the most. And so that they have that, but then the schedule, and then, and they still are a little bit inconsistent on the wing. They don't always get contributions from their wings. And when they do, it's not always the same guys. So I think that's probably the difference between them and Michigan and Michigan State, where the contributions for those guys are pretty consistent. Michigan's circumstance, they can get it from anybody. Since we returned to Big Ten play off of the holidays, Michigan has had 4 different players lead them in scoring, and none of them has been their leading scorer. Iggy Brazdeikis has not.
That is the most Michigan stat ever. Jeez.
Iggy teams have decided that Iggy is the target for them, and it's understandable. He was great in the first 2 months, but it doesn't help. Yesterday Northwestern left open Xavier Simpson, and he scored 24 points, and they left open John Teskey, and he scored 17. And so it just doesn't help you to play that way. I don't think that you can overweight any of their players unless you get lucky. If you overweight toward particular players and then the guy that you leave open has a tough day, then good for you. And then maybe you have a shot, but it really makes it tough. So it's those 3. And then the 4th team, I think right now, Minnesota is in that spot. It's going to be a rotating.
Yeah, who wants it? It's going to change every week.
It could change I don't think they play tonight, but it could change tonight. It could change tonight if IU beats Nebraska. Maybe they slide in. Who knows? But it's going to be those 2 spots, 3 and 4. I think that they're going to include a lot of teams because there are, when people talk about the Big Ten getting 10 teams, it's because they have 10 really good teams. I'm not sure whether or not the math can work on that. I've done some calculations on it from when something similar has happened in the past, and it takes a really interesting confluence of events that I don't think that Rutgers, Penn State, Northwestern, and Illinois will be up for. I don't think they're going to cooperate and say, you know what, we'll just stop. We're not going to play hard anymore. We're not going to try to win. No, I think they're going to keep competing and keep doing things like what Rutgers did last week to Ohio State.
We might have to up the degree of difficulty on this segment and have it be like power rank the conference 3 to 7. And then you really have to split some hairs.
About 1 and 2.
Yeah. Well, just because, I think you're right, though. It's going to be really hard for either of those teams to fall out. Not that they couldn't, but it's tough to foresee it right now. All right, so speaking of difficult discussions, this was another question that came in for our mailbag, and I saved it for this conversation. From JD, he said, who are your Big Ten all-conference teams right now? Seems like a tough choice. Yeah, I'll say. I spent way too much time on this earlier today, and I still don't feel really good about it. I'll start this, and I want to see if you agree. I feel like there are 3 locks. Like, I write these guys' names down in pen. Carson Edwards, Ethan Happ, and Cassius Winston.
There you go. Absolutely.
Okay.
Easiest thing to do.
Yeah, to me, and even though you might question Cassius Winston's defense, his offense is so good. He's got to be there. So I had those three, and then I had a really hard time.
Right.
So who did you go with as your fourth and fifth? And well, I didn't go with it. I don't know. How is this officially done, actually? Do you have to do like guard, forward, center, or do you just pick the five best players? Okay, I don't either.
Especially now with positionless basketball.
Yeah, I just went five best players. Okay.
Yeah, so, like it's not the same as football where, if you pick 11 guys, no position, you might pick 11 quarterbacks. I mean, it's not. So, yeah. 1 year, 2002, we had like 4 point guards. We had Steve Logan and Jay Williams and Juan Dixon and
don't say that name on this podcast.
And Drew Gooden, and because they were the four best players in the country. Drew was the least of that five. I mean, they were just the best. So it didn't feel right to say, oh no, because you play the same position, you got to sit. No, it didn't feel right. So just trying to pick the five guys who've had the biggest impact, and it is really hard, as you said. When I got past those three. I will give you a little plug for sporting news. We will have our midseason All-America team going up tomorrow. And part of what made it easy, those three guys are all on there somewhere in those 15 guys, 3 teams, 1, 2, 3. So that's done. And then the fourth guy for me, I thought about it and I said, I just have to put Xavier Simpson in there. It's an odd pick. He's only averaging about 8 points a game. But he may be the most valuable player in the league right now. His defense is incredible. His leadership. He's the one constant that you can look at and say he's there almost every night for them. Even when he's not scoring, he's creating.
Yeah.
He's defending all the time. And so I went with him. And look, I left out guys who are having great years so that I could put him in there. And anybody who says, no, it should be this guy, I can't argue with you because your guy, whoever that is really good. But I went with Xavier for that spot. And then the fifth spot was where it's tough because now I've got 7, 8 candidates for that. I mean, I had to leave out James Palmer. I had to leave out Tyler Cook.
Yeah.
I had to leave out Romeo.
Ooh.
I know. But I mean, it's not – look, like I said, it's tonight. I mean, Romeo's great, having a fabulous year. And Jawan's not far off that list as well. But I went with Amir Coffey. And again, some of that is a momentum pick. Yeah. He's had an incredible stretch over the course of basically since we returned to Big Ten play. He's been amazing and at both ends in all ways. But that doesn't necessarily, that's now, that's today. And remember, we're not even at the midpoint of the Big Ten season. Basically, we're less than a third of the way through. I mean, we'd be a third of the way through, give or take, in a normal year, but remember, we're going 20 this year. We've only won 6 for most teams. So this is about a quarter of the way through, basically.
And seeing what's interesting about that is most people would probably put Jordan Murphy on first just because of the double-doubles and, all the things that he does. He's like first in the country in free throw rate too. There's just so many guys having big seasons. It was interesting what you said about Simpson because as soon as I got done with the first 3, I went to Michigan and I was like, okay, who's the Michigan guy?
Right.
And I couldn't parse it. And that's what I said. I feel like if you're going to do 3 teams, you almost just have to do like a first team and a second team, and then there's Michigan starting 5. not that they're the third team, but just because how their team is better than the sum of the parts. And like you said, each guy can kind of step up. So it's hard for me to figure out the guy. I can't argue with Xavier Simpson. But to me, the next 2 guys after those 2 were Bruno Fernando and Romeo Langford. Fernando just for the dominance, and maybe it's recency and domination bias from just having seen him play, and then just I'm curious to get your thoughts on whether you would put Romeo over Juwan or how you would rate those 2, because I went back and forth on it, but I eventually settled on Romeo because he's been better in Big Ten play, and simply because Juwan's had a couple of, games this year where he's, been out early in the game and it's really sunk Indiana. But it's very difficult to parse those 2, but it was almost more of a kind of a trajectory type thing for me.
I think for me, it was a consistency thing to an extent. Yeah. And some of it, again, is because of the fouls and because if you're looking on, like you said, degree of difficulty, what Romeo is being asked to do, unless you factor in the class, the freshman, what Romeo is being asked to do is not as hard as what Juwan is being asked to do, because he's being asked to play inside, outside, defend posts at basically 6'8". That's hard. And so his job is harder. but Romeo has been more consistent through this year to this point. Again, I wouldn't be shocked if both of them wound up on the first team. I mean, that would be IU's ideal, because if it happened, that would mean that the rest of the season went spectacularly. You're not going to get two guys on a first team in this league unless you just, really kick. So from that standpoint, it could be both of them. They're both terrific, and both have had great years. But I think Romeo's been a little bit more consistent. He was the one it felt harder to leave off at this point. And again, I didn't feel bad about it, because it's so early in this conversation.
Yeah.
Because a lot, like I said, with Amir, a lot of it just came from recency, and recency, of course, is Big Ten play. So I felt like he was really being good at a time that led into this. But one of the interesting, going back to what you were saying about Michigan and their starting five, and you think about it, their best player is Jordan Poole. He's their best guy. I mean, he's the guy who does the most on offense and defense. But there are days when they don't need him to be great, and other people won't let him be great. Their star player is Iggy Brazdeikis, because he's so dynamic. He's been a leading scorer more often. He's the team's leading scorer. Their most valuable player, like I said, is Xavier Simpson. And so it's really interesting. And then, the guy who's probably been the most consistent is Charles Matthews. So that's what makes them so great, is that they have all these different elements combining into a whole that has just been terrific. And it's cool to watch. It's been fun to watch, and it'll continue to unfold over the next 2 months.
Yeah, I appreciate watching them play. Obviously, as an IU fan, I'd like to see them come back to the pack a little bit, but they're fun to watch play. What's interesting about this conversation, we haven't mentioned Nick Ward, we haven't mentioned Lamar Stevens, haven't mentioned Caleb Wesson, Vic Law. I mean, you go up and down the conference, there are guys having really strong seasons. And that's what makes a great conference, is great players and really good coaches. And I think the Big Ten has both this year. So
yeah, I can say that, look, there are two national championship contenders, I believe, in the league. And at the start of the year, I might have said zero that legitimately you thought could do it. I mean, other than maybe they got way better than we thought. They didn't get that much better. I mean, Michigan just was better than I thought, and I had them higher than most. Michigan State, Cash and Josh have gotten so much better, and Nick, they've gotten so much better that they are in that picture now. Which, not surprising that they made that progress, just that you couldn't necessarily count on it, but they have. So you've got those two, and then you've got more depth in this league than I think any I've ever seen. Because when I compared them, when I talked about that 10 the other day, at the start of the conversation, I compared them to the 2011 Big East. And that was the year the year that got 11 Big East teams into the tournament out of 16. And one of the reasons they got 11 was because they were great, but also because the bottom was awful. I mean, DePaul won one game that year. They were so good. I looked at it together, combined, that the 5 teams that did not make it won 20 league games total. And 7 of those were by Seton Hall, which was number 12. So the rest of them combined only won 13. And I think 7 of those games that were out of those 20 were won against the upper 11. 7 out of 20. The rest were all just them beating on each other.
Yeah.
It's still early, and we haven't had a lot of Rutgers versus Ohio States yet. But we saw how close Northwestern came to Michigan. We saw how close they came when they were at IU. Mm-hmm. They could still do some damage. Penn State beat Virginia Tech out of the league. They're really going the wrong direction right now, but I'm not sold that that's the way it's going to stay. So I think that this league, top to bottom, I mean, to the very bottom, is as strong and deep as I can remember.
All right, Mike, let's close with this. Tonight, obviously, we have Indiana, Nebraska. Saturday, Indiana, Purdue. What are the matchups in between those two that IU fans should pay attention to?
Well, when you were going to ask, I was going to make a little joke about you should be aware of the Purdue game, but you already are, so you're good.
We're aware.
The beautiful thing about this league right now is that you turn on the television. If you want to watch some good Big Ten basketball, it's on every night, and the games are all good. So so it's hard to winnow it down. But Michigan on Saturday goes to Wisconsin. That's a huge game. Obviously, it's a losable game for the Wolverines, and Spartan fans and Hoosiers fans will all be rooting for the Badgers, I would think.
They've been surprisingly beatable at home.
Yeah, I know, but you can't say that all of a sudden it's, that it's not still a fortress. They've had an odd year. I think they've had a real rhythm problem on that team. They can't seem to get, Brad Davison struggled early with his transition back to playing off the ball. And now I think he's got it. And now he's got it. And Dimitri Trice can't make a shot. Basically, I mean, maybe once or twice a game he strikes, but a guy who was literally shooting 60% from three at one point in the season is now, over the last several games, not even at the Mendoza line. So they just can't seem to get in sync. And of course, Ethan Happ is great almost every night, but it's just but when they put it together, we've seen they've beaten terrific teams. So big game for there. And then the other one that struck my eye was Maryland, Ohio State. Maryland needs it to stay with the other two at the top of the league, and Ohio State needs it to hang on. There, Ohio State is already in a 3-game losing streak. Their next 4 games are pretty tough, and that's one that it's at home. You got to think at home against a team that's that although they're excellent, they're basically your weight class, or at least you would hope. And so that's a game that Ohio State really needs. So it should be fascinating to watch.
Awesome. Well, Mike, as always, thank you for your insight. Next week, we'll be doing this on Tuesday. Martin Luther King Jr. Day is Monday, so we're gonna do Banner Monday on Tuesday again. So we will look forward to hopefully getting your impressions of 2 Indiana victories and seeing if the Hoosiers can squeeze their way back into your top 4.
Well, good luck to your men, and I'll look forward to seeing all the games and talking to you next Tuesday.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. Alrighty, and coming up on the Assembly Call, it is time for our game preview. IU Nebraska tips in 2.5 hours. We're going to talk about it. Josh Wilson from the Inside Out Pod is here to tell us what to expect in tonight's game. Stick with us on the Assembly Call. All right. Excellent. Let's get Josh in here. Good stuff from Mike. Very good stuff, as always. All right. Now we got to get this podcast up so people can listen to it before the game. All right. What's up, Josh?
Hey, how's it going, man?
It's going well, man. Going well. Thanks for coming on and being ready to break this game down.
Yeah, it is always a pleasure.
Are you going to the game?
I am not. No, my dad's got all the tickets for January, so I won't be back in Bloomington, and probably till middle of February. I've got to go. Got to go out to Philly for work. Actually, I'll be out there for a couple of days in the middle of when they play at home against Iowa. So I was hoping to make that game, but I won't get the chance.
How far from Bloomington do you live? Are you in Indy?
No, I'm about a half hour, 45 minutes north of Kokomo.
Okay.
So it's about a 2.5, 3 hour trip, depending on what time of day you make the trip.
Well, and that makes a 5:30 start even more difficult to try and get to.
Yeah.
What a terrible. I mean, like, I get it for TV, but man, for the actual people going to a game, what a terrible start time on a weekday. Like, there's no chance of the place being more than half filled by the time it tips, is there?
Right. Yeah. I mean, you got a lot of the fan base coming from Indy, and they get off work at 5 o'clock, and they got 90 minutes to get down to that ever daunting 37-69.
Yeah. Also, we can be on FS1 with announcers who have never seen us play. Although tonight Raftery's on there, and Raftery's good. I don't know about Joe Davis, but Raftery's good.
I think Joe Davis did one of their games earlier. He wasn't too bad. I think he's the younger guy.
It's more Brando who just Brando mails it in.
Yeah, or Donnie Marshall. Jeez.
He was better. I will give him this. Now the bar was low because all he had to do to be better was not just like out and out insult the entire program and the women's program. So the bar was very low, but I thought he made actually a few points that I thought were good. So I'll give him a little credit. And I'll give them credit for their shout out to Eric Anderson and Hutch. That was that was well deserved. But
yeah. Good on them for that.
When Brando started wondering why Evan Fitzner was letting a 3 fly, I was like, all right, this guy does not know what he's talking about. Yeah. All right, let's hop in. We'll probably keep this to 10, 15 minutes or so. I've got a few things, but I'll start it with you. And
kind of you got a busy day going back to back almost.
I know. We've never had this before since we started doing the Banner Monday show. So it'll be it's a full day of IU basketball. But hey, that's all right.
Can't beat it.
No, I'll take it. All right, here we go. Welcome back to Banner Monday. Each week here in our final segment, we dedicate it to previewing Indiana's upcoming opponent. The upcoming opponent is Nebraska in just a couple of hours, so a very quick turnaround. So we brought in Josh Wilson, who does a great job of previewing these games for us. Josh, also the host of the Inside Out pod, so he's kind of drowning his Colts sorrows and just jumping right into talking about IU basketball. Turn the page quickly, and fortunately you have a game on Monday to jump right into, which I'm sure is good.
Yeah, it's definitely great. The whole 1-0 slogan didn't turn out so hot. So
yeah,
we're on from Kansas City.
Yes. Well, still, I think an auspicious first year for Frank Reich, and it seems like the Colts kind of got back on track. So that was nice to see.
After that 1-5 start, I was expecting a top 5 draft pick. So I'm good with how the season ended.
Yes. All right. So let's jump into this game. I want to point out some of Nebraska's weaknesses, but I think it's important just to note, I think, off the top, maybe for more casual fans. I don't know how many casual fans are listening to this podcast because it's not really geared toward the casual fan. But, this is a good Nebraska team. Sometimes you see Nebraska in basketball and you think, okay, Nebraska at home, this should be a gimme win. Certainly not. Now, Nebraska has struggled on the road, so I think this is a game Indiana fans should rightly expect to win and that we need to win. But Indiana's going to have to play really good because Nebraska is a very, very solid and balanced team throughout their starting lineup.
Yeah, and I think the big key is Justin Smith's going to have to stay out of foul trouble because James Palmer hasn't quite looked himself the last 2 games, and they lost at Iowa, and thankfully for his sake, Isaiah Roby came to play against Penn State, but I think Palmer's going to try to come out and really put his footprint on the game. So Justin Smith's going to have to play smart for about the first 5 minutes, and Indiana's going to have a good start, much like Maryland, but continue to play well. And keep Nebraska kind of, in check.
Yeah, I mean, and to me, one of the things that Maryland game highlighted was just how important he is defensively. Because people ask, why did we stop doubling in the second half? Well, because you didn't have your best defender out there, Justin Smith, who is so good at recognizing, what to do and then quick enough to actually do it. And you're going to have more flexibility with him. And so, yes, he definitely is going to need to stay out there. Where do you see as the areas that Indiana can really attack this Nebraska team? Because to me, when you kind of dig into the numbers, there's a couple that stand out, and I mentioned them earlier, and we'll get into them. But from your watching them and just looking at the stats, where do you think Indiana has the advantage in this game?
Well, I don't know it's so much an advantage. I think, Nebraska matches up pretty well just with size and the way that they play. So I think that'll be an even playing field. But I think Indiana's got to take, I guess, the advantage maybe they have on 2-point field goal shooting and really attack Nebraska and make them, foul you and make them, go to the free throw line, play with that aggressiveness. Nebraska doesn't have an extremely deep bench whatsoever, and the guys that they do bring in really aren't effective. So you got to really try to attack them, make them guard you, or, make them kind of play Olay defense, if they're trying to stay on the floor versus sitting on the bench with two fouls, less than 5 minutes into the game. So I think it's really going to be all about penetration, swinging the ball, not taking the first open 3 if it's not a really good look. Get Nebraska to swing defensively and then attack their wings because they're not going to want to foul real early. So I think Indiana's got a really good chance to get some easy buckets early on.
Yeah, they don't foul. I mean, they don't put teams on the free throw line. And when you look at their losses, they've had a guy or two in foul trouble, and that forces them to play to their bench, and they don't really like to do that. Like their starting 5, right up there with Michigan and Michigan State's among the best in the conference, but they just don't have many people that they can bring in off the bench. So I think you're absolutely right about that. They're not a great defensive rebounding team. So it would seem like Indiana might have a chance for second chance points. I will say, you look at the numbers in synergy, they're in the 80th percentile in terms of not allowing putbacks. So they're giving up some rebounds, but they're pretty good at, not allowing opponents to turn those into points. But still, coming off a game against Maryland where rebounding was just awful, it would be nice to see, Indiana do a better job on the glass. From an individual matchup standpoint, you talked about Palmer, and he's a guy who, uses a lot of possessions, takes a lot of shots. The one thing that became clear to me looking at the games they've won and the games they've lost is he can be a very inefficient volume shooter. Like he will take shots and he'll miss a lot of shots, but he'll keep taking them. It seems to me like what differentiates his good games over his bad games more than anything is how often he gets to the line. Because even in games where he's not making shots, he'll literally shoot like 14, 15 free throws. I mean, he has some big time, like double-digit free throw games. And so that strikes me as something that's important for Indiana, to defend him without fouling, not only to avoid foul trouble, but simply because if you do that, he's an upperclassman, but a place like Indiana, tough environment like Simon Scott Assembly Hall, you wouldn't expect a huge shooting night from him. And if you don't allow him to get to the line, now you depress his point totals, and that's a big part of what they do offensively.
Yeah, and if I'm Archie, I think I just tell Justin just to play straight up. Really, if he gets the ball in the post or on the wing, maybe give him a step. But if he
you think Justin will guard Palmer and not Roby?
Yeah, I don't know. I think Palmer's more dangerous, so I think maybe you put Langford on Roby, or maybe I don't know how they'll match up, but I think Palmer, because really Palmer's going to try to get his. I mean, he's averaging 19 and a half a game. I mean, there's nights he's gone for 30, 29. I mean, he's done 30 a couple times, 29 a couple times. So I think you got to put your best defender on him and at least, make him take tough shots, even if, Romeo's guarding him, or, Juwan, who I'm not sure who Nebraska's fifth starter is. I think it's that Thomas Allen.
Allen. Is he a big guy?
I believe
he
guard. I believe he's a big guy because Watson's the point, and then Copeland's kind of the 2-3, and they play a really big lineup.
Yeah. Allen's a guard. He's 6'1".
Is he?
Yeah.
Okay.
So he and Watson. So they have a couple of shorter guards. Then Palmer 6'6", and then you got Roby at 6'8" and Copeland at 6'9". I mean, I almost wonder, especially given how Romeo has done. Like when he guarded Vic Law, where it was like kind of a mano-a-mano matchup against another team's best player. I wonder if you're Archie, if you start out giving him that challenge. Because there are probably still people right now who would put Palmer on first team All Big Ten over Romeo, or which I think is insane. Palmer's a really good player. I've never been as high on him as some other people are, and I think Romeo clearly, like statistically, has been better. I would love to see it one-on-one, go out there and defend.
Yeah.
Now, you got to do it without fouling. But I think Romeo responds to those kind of challenges.
Yeah, I was getting ready to say that. I think that brings the best out of Langford, and I think you saw it a little bit at Maryland. I was at the Northwestern game in person, so yeah, him and Vic Law went right at each other. I know Vic Law had kind of made a comment, and it was like a media session the day or two before the game that he basically, well, I hope Romeo's ready. And I think, it's kind of like, okay.
Oh, well, he will be, Vic.
Yeah.
He'll be ready.
Yeah, he'll be ready. So that's a great point. So I don't think you put Juwan on him just because how much he uses, and the ball and possessions. I think Juwan's a little more important, obviously, but than Smith, that is. But yeah, Romeo would be a great matchup because the length's better. I'm interested to see how that comes out. That would be a good matchup to watch. I think Romeo, because I know you and Alex Bozich talked about that extra gear he may have, and I think that may bring it out tonight.
Yeah. So, I went into Synergy, as I like to do before these games, just to see, especially these good teams, like Maryland and Nebraska. Okay, they're, probably really good to excellent in most things. Where's the weakness? And for Nebraska, it's incredible. You look at their synergy profile, and it's really stark. I mean, they are excellent or very good in almost everything defensively. Defending spot-up shooters and defending isolations. Like they're just really good across the board. But it jumps out their one weakness. And this is why I feel better about this game. And I feel a lot more confident now about Indiana being able to win this game, because I think what Indiana does really well offensively, assuming that we do more of it, is really going to match up with what Nebraska struggles with, and that's defending the pick and roll. Mm-hmm. So defending, and there's two ways that they look at defending a pick and roll. It's how the possession ends. So does it end with the ball handler ending the possession, with a shot or getting fouled or turning it over, or does it end with the screener getting it, maybe on a pop or on a roll? So in defending pick and rolls, when it's the ball handler who finishes the possession, Nebraska is in the 39th percentile. When it's the screener finishing the possession, they're in the 35th percentile. They are 76 or better in everything else. So this is the clear weakness, and I think this is the play type that has gone against them the second or third most times. So it's a decent enough sample size. If you flip over to the Indiana side of it, Romeo is in the 95th percentile as the ball handler in pick and rolls. Devontae Green is in the 90th percentile. And those are the two guys that we put in pick and rolls most often. And the only guy that we've really used as a screener in pick and rolls any significant amount is Juwan Morgan, who is in the 80-something percentile. And I think this could be a game where you put Fitzner in there and allow him to, do some pick and pops, and he might be able to get some threes. So I'm going to be really interested to see. This has been a growing part of our offense. I'm going to be really interested to see if Indiana keys on this as Nebraska's weakness and just keeps putting, Romeo and Devontae too, put them in pick and rolls. To me, that's what I would do until they prove they can stop it, because we've gotten so much better at it, and it seems like the one weakness that Nebraska has.
Yeah, and obviously we've seen how good the pick and roll between Romeo and Juwan can be. And if you make, Nebraska pick one or the other, and you have Justin Smith in a short corner, maybe Devontae Green or Al Durham, who's probably the best 3-point shooter right now.
He's the best 3-point shooter in the Big Ten right now.
Yeah, so,
Al Durham.
Yeah. There you go. You put him in the opposite corner, then you really make them, pick their poison, because, pick and pop with or pick and roll, and then you have Smith in the short corner. Well, you got three options to stop, and Langford's really good decision making, and Al's in the opposite corner. Then you've got four guys, and Juwan sets a solid enough pick, then you're playing kind of 4-on-3, and somebody's going to have to make a decision. So I think if you make them make tough decisions like that, Indiana's going to have a really good offensive game tonight.
The other thing that's interesting with Nebraska is they're 1-3 in true road games. And you look at now, those losses are to good teams. They lost to Minnesota, they lost to Maryland, they lost to Iowa. Minnesota is ranked 53rd. They're the lowest ranked. But in their 4 games, including the one game they won on the road at Clemson, here are the points per possession given up defensively: 1.1, 1.25, 1.14, 1.22. So there's still a little bit of a program that's really good at home, playing in the friendly confines there in Lincoln, but struggles a little bit on the road and seems to struggle especially defensively. So it's another reason I'm feeling more bullish about this one the closer it gets, because I felt like we really kind of found something offensively in the Maryland game, especially with what Romeo was able to do. And if this Nebraska team isn't ready to, kind of kick it into another gear defensively, assuming we stay out of foul trouble and just don't revert back to turning it over a ton, I think we can really do some things offensively that'll bother them. And even if our defense is still struggling a little bit like it's been the last couple games, I don't think it'll be enough for Nebraska to be able to come in and get the win.
Yeah, I think Indiana's going to make it tough. I think Romeo's probably just going to be on another level the rest of the year, and I think he's kind of had a small coming out party the last couple games. And at Maryland, he really showed what he could do. With Nebraska, as poor defensively as they are in the pick and roll, having to, play him and Juwan, I think Devontae Green's starting to find a shot a little bit. So hopefully, that makes life tough on them. Obviously, the Crimson Guard will be back in town tonight, so the place ought to be rocking. And I think Indiana's got a really good chance to probably win by double digits. If they turn the ball over 7 times tonight, they probably win by 12 plus, I would think.
Yeah. Skip class, students. Get there early.
Yeah, get there real early.
Okay, so we always do the game ball at the end of the game, but who is your prediction for, like, your pregame prediction for game ball? And maybe we do 2 levels. Who would you give it to on the top level? Like, who do you think will be better between Romeo and Juwan? And then who is, like, the supporting cast member that you think is going to really step up and have a better than expected game?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious to see who's going to guard Juwan, because I think he presents a number of mismatches here. Because, Copeland is 6'9", but he doesn't play real physical. Kind of same with Palmer. And
Roby is probably their best NBA prospect, best athlete.
Yeah, just with it. He kind of reminds me of Troy Williams. I don't know if you guys have seen that. I've watched Nebraska play a couple times this year, and every time I watch him play, it's like, it's Troy Williams. I think Roby may shoot a little bit better at this point in his college career, but I'll be interested to see who guards Juwan, but I think he's got a mismatch advantage with all 3 of those guys. So it'll be eager to see that, but I think Romeo really comes out and plays well. So I'll take Romeo there, and I think Al Durham has a really good game tonight. I think he gets some open shots. I think he gets some really good opportunities kind of, coming off the defensive end. I think Indiana's going to be able to create some turnovers. I think Al Durham has the best supporting cast tonight.
I'm going to stick with Fitzner. I think this is going to be – he needs a confidence-building game. Archie's talked about wanting to run some stuff for him when he gets in. And in a game where, the pick and roll can be used and he can maybe pop and get some threes, he's due for a game. And I think maybe getting back home, he gets some opportunities, he knocks them down. I think that would be big. So,
yeah,
it sounds like
I wouldn't be shocked.
It'd be, man, and it would be so big, just to get his confidence going again. Like, I don't think he's going to be a consistent contributor. I don't think that's in the cards. But I still think he can be a guy that helps Indiana win 3, 4, 5 games by making some big 3-pointers.
Kind of like the Marquette game. This almost kind of has like a Marquette feel to it almost.
Yeah.
Because we knew Marquette wasn't really solid defensively. And Indiana just came out and I mean, if Fitzner has a night, if he shoots well, and I think if Indiana's shooting the ball well, it could very well. I don't know if it'd be 23 like that game was, but like I said, I think it could be 12 to 18. I think they could get hot.
Well, we have we started the segment trying to tell everybody to respect Nebraska and that this is going to be a tough game. Maybe Indiana will have to grind it out. Now here we are at the end. We've talked to ourselves, but I kind of feel the same way you do. I felt a lot better. Now, I will not feel this way when we go to Nebraska. Playing at Nebraska, totally different ball game. But I kind of feel the way you do. Like, I did not have a good feeling before the Maryland game, and the last 30 minutes of that game played out to a certain extent like how I thought it would. But, man, I'm getting a good feeling about this one.
Indiana needs to win this game, and they probably need to win it playing well because you go at Purdue, at Northwestern, Michigan, at Rutgers, at Michigan State. If they don't win this game tonight, it could be a long couple weeks. So they need to play really well. And like you said, I feel really good about it. Hopefully we're right.
Hopefully. Hopefully. And if not, then hopefully no one got to listen to the segment because we did it so soon before the game.
Right.
All right, man. Well, Josh, thanks for coming on, especially on short notice. Always appreciate it. Remind everybody where to go to subscribe to the Inside Out podcast.
Yeah, anywhere you listen to podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, anything like that. I'm on all those platforms, and you can follow it on Twitter at @inside_out pod. Thanks to Archie Miller for the podcast idea.
And you talk about IU, Colts, Pacers too?
Yeah, I do. It's the name is primarily from Archie, the whole Inside Out thing. But I'm a huge Colts fan, huge Pacers fan. Obviously with the IU connection with Vic there. So I just love to talk about sports. But yeah, it's got a pretty big IU following at the moment, I would say.
Awesome. Well, everybody take a look at that, and then of course join us for the post-game show after tonight's game. All right, that'll do it for us on this week's edition of Banner Monday. If you ever want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, join us at assemblycall.com on Monday afternoons for the live broadcast of our Banner Monday recording. And you can always subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter, which will make you a smarter and more well-informed IU basketball fan. Thank you for listening. We'll be back in a few hours for the IU Nebraska postgame show. Hope you'll join us. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, Josh.
Yeah, anytime. I really hope they play well because Tim Miles is kind of like my Dean Spanos. For some reason, I just don't like the guy. I mean, I think he's an okay basketball coach, but I don't know. Something about his antics, and I just don't like him. But
yeah, hey,
we'll see.
I hope they leave a very disappointed bunch. I'm feeling good about it too. So
the way he acts on the sideline, especially when they beat IU a couple years ago, and the whole him and Tom Crean thing, it's just like, all right.
That was. I mean, in that moment, I was very proud of Crean because he kind of stood up and he was tough. But that was the most kind of awkward and least intimidating stare down of two coaches that just are not intimidating at all. But I thought Tom Crean actually handled that pretty well for Tom Crean. I'm not sure he could have done better in that situation. So kudos to Crean that he didn't. Yeah. That's not really a situation he excels at, but he did well in that one.
Yeah.
So I was proud of him. All right, everybody. We will see you in a few hours. I'm gonna go get this podcast up and pick up my daughter and get ready for the game.
All right. Have fun. I'll be watching tonight.
All right. See you, everybody.
See you.